Welcome today to Phenomenal Conversation number 54 with Andres Roberts, and we're going to be talking about nature and bioleadership. That's a working title, and I usually form the final title once the interview is recorded. So before we launch into the interview, thanks for coming today, Andres. I usually give this little spiel about Phenomenal Conversations. So Phenomenal Conversations interview change makers that I feel are living the change. We also try to expand imagination in the midst of the polycrisis, ask profound questions, and amplify meaningfulness and nuance in a chaotic world. And we do that in two ways: one-on-one interviews like the one I'm having today with Andres, but once quarterly, we do a live podcast format in the evening online, and that's where I do a shorter interview, and then we have a group conversation in dyads, triads, in a large group, and harvest what's the wisdom in the room. And we do have a live one coming up March the 11th with Richard Flyer on fostering symbiotic cultures. That's Wednesday, March the 11th, 1900 European time, and 2026, if you happen to tune into this some other year. Okay, that's the introduction. Oh, and if you think this is an important conversation and you like it, please do like, subscribe, comment, and follow. Thanks very much. And now I'm going to ask Andres to introduce himself and offer us a little bit a synopsis of his bio and how he came to found bioleadership.
Oh, Dave, thanks so much for the invitation to be together and to speak, and I'm excited about what might come up in just being in the chaos together. I love that. I love that as an introduction. So yeah, my name is Andres Roberts. I was born in Colombia. I'm half Colombian, half English. Traveled around in my early years with my dad's work. We landed back where my dad started in Birkenhead in the northwest of England. That's a very big defining thing that I'm still learning so much about. You know, what is it to have anchors in the northwest of England and be Colombian as well?
Yeah.
And what does that mean for what we're trying to bridge and navigate in the world? But I guess from my very early 20s, I was interested in how do we help systems be whole and well. I actually graduated, started working at a bank in a marketing team and then a strategy team. And I was really struck by one thing being, wow, why is it so hard to connect the dots here? Like, you know, you can see that sometimes one part of this system isn't speaking to another. But I also remember having this memory of seeing a colleague and someone who was a dear friend at that time look totally depleted,
Right.
you know, by being at work. And that actually was a real battery for me for a long time. And then I left that. I set up a first project, which we were just talking about actually, which amazingly was about playfulness more than anything, and creating spaces where people could participate and play and feel more alive in different ways. And I learned a lot about that, you know, sort of how to create stories in which we can step in and participate and be more of ourselves. And then, long story short, I got more involved in social business and social enterprise. I did an extraordinary master's program in 2010 that was about responsible business and sustainability. And from day one, for me, that became about worldview.
Right.
And it became about a perceived sense of disconnection from nature, and how we seem to have created a world that's rooted in that sense of disconnection. Stuff that I know is not new for you. But it was very, very much the seed of so much of what's flowered since then, you know, over the last 15, 16 years. By good fortune, I, you know, started to guide with a friend of mine in nature, take people into nature, observe incredible things by just helping people slow down, be still, give themselves room to notice both outer nature and inner nature, that gave me a huge belief that we can rekindle a sense of connection, that we can look after ourselves, listen to systems, connect in different ways. And the combination of all of those things, the learning, the systems change, the deeper work with nature and so on, became the Bioleadership Project. And that today is a global community of people and projects working with nature to shift systems for the better, for the good of all people and all of life.
I love that as a tagline. It's not
Yeah,
enough is included in taglines usually, but I love those ambitious visions. So if we go to the time when you were practicing and getting to know yourself and getting to know the power of nature, can you describe an experience that was kind of seminal for you, that kind of catalyzed, instigated that faith you just expressed in
right.
our potential for change and transformation?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we all have them, which is the interesting thing. And I can talk about a big one, which, I've sort of written about and shared and spoken about. But the more I go on, the more I do the work we do, the more it's about helping everybody remembering the little micro moments that we've all had in our lives and
Yeah,
using them
yeah,
as anchors, right? Um, but yeah, I was lucky coming back to that moment where I started that master's. A very dear friend of mine called Corby Hort, uh, who's a guide, a very soulful person, very dedicated to learning, was already guiding people in nature, and he said, "Would you like to come out and see what I'm doing in the Spanish Pyrenees?"
right,
Which would involve kind of sitting alone for 24 hours, and then maybe see how it goes, and we can start guiding that together. And it involved spending a few days going for walks, then heading off to the top of a mountain, sitting on a cliff with very little on me, very little food, very little, certainly no books. I can't
right.
even remember if we had mobile phones. We must have had mobile phones at that time. But I can't remember looking at it or thinking about it at all or even taking anything like that. And then, yeah, in that 24-hour moment, with nowhere else to go, I stayed still on a space the size of half a tennis court, probably, but looking down at this extraordinary view, this gorgeous valley. It was February, so it was cold, and there was a moment where I know it doesn't snow that much in that part of the Spanish Pyrenees, but there were snowflakes around me, and I was completely enchanted and in love in that moment with that experience in that place. And then what happened for me was also something that had never happened really with that quality, was really giving room to listen to voices inside of myself.
Okay, yeah,
So it wasn't just, wow, look where I am, isn't it extraordinary? And things that might come from that wonder. It was also that the place became a base or a mirror, and the time became a kind of mirror to my internal self. And I'd never experienced that before.
okay.
Not to that, not in that depth. And that then became the beginning of a lot more work, a lot more learning, and a lot more practice, and then guiding to help people kind of be in nature in that way.
So there was a dissolution of the subject object divide in that moment. Oh, that's what it sounds like to me.
Um, I think that became richer and deeper for me later.
Okay.
I think that moment for me was about wonder, freedom, joy,
Mm.
care, space, and noticing actually.
Noticing, yeah.
Noticing, yeah. And then I was like, all right, well, notice out there, but also noticing inside. And for the first time, I was noticing where impulses came from inside of me, where reflexes came from inside of me, where, it's interesting to think our belief systems, stuff that I'm imagining, you look at and these conversations touch on. are our beliefs part of nature as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Are our values nature as well? To give time to notice those things as if they're nature. It's kind of fascinating.
Well, that's a beautiful uh, connection point to my next question, because
Mm.
you're probably aware that there's a lot of nature-based education happening, a lot of people, classrooms in the forest. There's a lot of new initiatives um, emphasizing the centrality of nature. One of the concerns I have is that unless what you've described occurs, then you get just
Right.
an objectification of nature as just another thing. So I'd quite love to find
Mm.
out how you work with people to shift from this nature as object that one is perceiving the world as nature as both subject and object. How do you work
Mm.
with people to dissolve that membrane?
Mm. Oh, it's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I'd love to know more of the examples that kind of you think work well in that as well in the stories you know.
Yeah,
Um, it's there, it's right there in front of us, obviously, and in our field and in our kind of sort of circles, that's a conversation, isn't it? I don't know. I'm really interested in how to kind of help bridge these things so that they're practically helpful and
yeah,
not in the abstract.
yeah,
And in that sense, where I go to it is how to have a little bit of both.
yeah.
A little bit of nature does feel like it's outside, and for a lot of people in the contemporary life, it is, of course, outside. It's
Of
out
course.
there,
Yeah, yeah,
you know. And at the same time, oh right, I am nature. So what's the helpful way, whether it's in a school or a business or a systemic change program or one's own life, how to have a healthy conversation about where am I at with nature being out there versus or at the same time inside of myself
yeah,
and and I guess I'm kind of interested also in then what is it to help people or to create space where we collectively come back to that feeling of like being enchanted with ourselves, our life,
yeah,
our oh right, that's rather than a cognitive thought about is nature out there, etc., etc., more a belief in
yeah,
which we come to see ourselves as nature as well. Like I've always found it amazing that the eyes are such beautiful things,
yeah, yeah,
and the eyes are us, and
yeah,
we tend to look in the mirror every day. But how often do we stop to think, what I'm looking at, that's me, is as beautiful as the kind of images that you see from, NASA about a galaxy. It's
yeah,
there, it's
yeah,
right in front of us. And how did that happen,
yeah, yeah,
and so how do we rekindle, or how do we allow ourselves, give permission to have a sense that I'm utterly magical and I'm nature as well.
yeah,
And and my wife is, and my daughter is, and our conversation is, and so on and so on. And then from there, that
yeah,
sense of like nature is us
yeah.
emerges as well, or it connects again.
I
Yeah.
think you point to something that reinforces. Is there an echo you're in?
No, not for me.
Okay, maybe it's me. Um, there's something that you're pointing to there about um, the enchantment, and this is what you mean, that actually most humans have a sense of that enchantment or magic maybe most days of their lives if they're paying attention. So there's this sense, and and often the division that I spoke to you about gets reinforced by the description of it. So everybody can describe who and what they
Mm,
think they are, but the practice of noticing it and being sensitized to it in the way that you
mm,
pointed to um, takes more ongoing practice and attention.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of what I'm extending from what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess your context with phenomenology and so on, and you'll know more about how to frame that than I. Um, but where that takes me is, I'm really inspired by, Buddhist perspectives, Taoist perspectives, and
Yeah,
Joanna Macy framed it beautifully as, describing dependent co-arising,
yeah,
and co-arising. And then that sense of, and it's interesting because both the nature is out there and nature is here is happening there at the same time. It's like the belief system there, or it's not a belief system, sorry, but the worldview maybe is, I'm emerging here because that exists and we're happening at the same time,
yeah,
right? And I I've I I've found that nature helps me believe that and understand it and see it as a kind of given. Like, right, things happen because they're in relationship.
yeah,
I'm happening and I am an I.
yeah, yeah,
It's helpful for me to navigate the world by saying I am here,
yeah,
but I am happening because of that. And even then, all of the wonderful stuff about microbes inside of us, or sorry, like um um sort of all our sorts of bacteria in our system that sort of I am, because there are so many things within my physical boundary and bodies that are also emerging at the same time, and quite fun to let oneself be sort of like, right, all of that is flowing continuously, and I'm a form.
Okay, Andres, I'm getting a bit distracted because of the light on my face, so I'm just going to
Okay,
pause for a moment and then
sure.
shift around until I find somewhere that's less annoying. Okay, Andre, just to carry on, um, you and I both met about 20 years ago, and we were already deeply concerned about the state of the planet and the degradation of ecosystems.
Mm,
I'm curious what your thoughts are on, and quantitatively, if we look at what's happened and the progress or lack of it that's been made, what your thoughts are on what's needed for, say, sufficient groundswell to kind of change direction or it's stop the
mm,
worst. What are your thoughts on that? Because I've interviewed different people and asked them about it, and I'll publish an article on it shortly. But I'm curious what you have to
mm,
say about your perception of working in this field, doing it seriously, encountering
mm,
businesses and organizations. What's your sense of, what's required to shift something in a
mm.
less worse direction, I'd say.
Right, yeah. I think one of the headlines I saw just yesterday in the Guardian was "Get set for a world of 3 degrees change."
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah. What, uh, where I've got to, wow, 20 years, which
yeah,
is, we talked about it earlier. And I feel like already 10 years ago, I felt like the arc is such that it's going to be a long time before we recover, and not in our lifetimes, and
yeah,
not
yeah,
in I'm almost glad that I had that insight, or for myself I came to that sense of, right, like, so I don't have a narrative that I've had a narrative for a while that um the things that we see, that we hold as, oh, right, this is how a society should be, or this is what we
yeah,
want to protect, we're going to lose a lot. We're going to
yeah,
lose a lot.
yeah,
And that doesn't mean I don't care about that, but my time horizon is long in terms of the work that we have to do.
yeah,
And I also have come to a point where I feel like feel like some of our work, I think like a good deal of my work is I'd like to be more and more into, well, what is the light that we carry into the future?
Yeah,
Um, I'd love that position to be wrong. I'd love things to turn around so much that in 50 years we're in a place where, all
yeah,
right, we've cracked it,
yeah,
like
yeah,
back to the great turning. And I'm having a good go, and with the bio leadership project we're having a good go, and we're trying to connect people who hold brilliant projects and are changing on financial change, governance change, products change, educational change by placing nature at the center. And so that's important and that's needed, but I'm also like, my belief is also like, we need to do this work, and we need to do the work of kind of care and love and consciousness, so that it's there when things get really, really, they already are really, really hard in parts of the world, obviously.
yeah,
And in our lives, they're really, really hard. Like, how do we hold that now? How do we hold it for the coming decades, centuries, and so on and so on? But so that it's there, so that in the future that
yeah,
there are the ingredients and is the knowledge, so that we can sustain, we can transform, we can resurge, if that's a word, in in
yeah.
in in more beautiful ways.
So
Yeah.
being the light in the darkness and providing examples of different ways of being and acting in the world. You could,
Yeah, I think so. And I feel like also it's like it's being the light and knowing how to be the darkness, it's
yeah,
it came I think after the last Trump election, funnily enough. I Something came to me that I'm letting go of this notion of being a change maker, or
yeah,
or wanting to support change makers, or using or the label change makers,
yeah,
like this idea that we're working towards a better place.
yeah,
Really, I don't know if one, I love the world now,
yeah,
and also this idea of let's build a better future. I love the future. Like, the present is so extraordinary. Wow, look where we live.
yeah, yeah,
We have Every day we have a chance to notice that. Every day we have a chance to speak to someone in such a way that gives them energy and life and appreciates them, and vice versa, gives us wonder. And
yeah,
every day we have a chance to make something better.
yeah.
So yeah, I've been letting go of that sense of like, I'm working to try and make it like the future better. I'm interested in making the present better, and
Yeah.
trusting that if we kind of keep passing that on, then the future might be better by itself. Yeah. Or not by itself, but we'll hand over, we'll pass on the baton of like, that's useful. Let's let the let's let our future selves and the people of the future, let's trust them. Um,
Well, I think you raised some interesting points there. I mean, Nora Bateson, whose training I've just been on, really deconstructs this impulse towards change and basically
right.
it actually most of human notions are mechanical and violent compared with how nature changes. So, if one becomes an ecosystem, one isn't thinking about changing because it's just organic in how
Mm,
nature operates. But also, I also, funnily enough, after all these years, I've come to a similar point about celebrating the life that's here now and engaging and experiencing that to its fullest to
mm,
create a ripple of life at its core is good in a way, and that
right.
the goodness of that can be shared anytime, almost in any circumstance, despite turmoil, upheaval, and trouble.
Mm, mm.
So,
Love that.
you spoke about the bio leadership. Could you share for people that are unfamiliar a couple of like inspiring examples of people that are working with nature and with communities and with
Mm,
ecosystems that
mm.
inspires you?
Oh, well, yeah, great. I love what you were just speaking to, by the way. I mean,
Yeah,
that inspired me, and amazing to kind of come to that point. Like, yeah, it'd be nice to kind of hear more about that. Um,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, just to answer that question or to say a bit about that, the fellowship is now 220 odd people, and we've got the
Yeah.
new cohort. And through that, it's fellow, and the invitation in the fellowship is come and be a part of a community. You know, if you're working on a question about how to support a shift or a change, or if you'd like to bring nature more into the center of how you work in your space or sector, then come and be part of this. And we have people working in education, in business, in, you know, uh, we've had people working in zones, there's farmers. And there's a belief in it, of course, that nobody can make the changes that we want to make alone. And if we want to sort of see a change in the world, then how do we connect these things up to work as a system, as an ecosystem together? And there are just so many forms of inspiration in it. You know,
Yeah.
I think what's coming to my mind is the the capacity, and a fellow said this to me recently about how having gone through the fellowship, they can hold complexity and the unknown
Okay.
much more care.
Yeah.
So it's not, well, the reason I'm saying that is that, you know, I think quality and what inspires me isn't just like what are people working on out there.
Yeah.
It's that they're riding the storm, they're navigating this moment
Yeah.
and staying true to like grounding themselves, being with nature and being looking after each other in a very
Yeah.
beautiful way.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, there's people bringing nature-led processes into healing and educational systems. You know, there's people who are trying to bring alternative governance models using nature into, like, you know, we've got people who work with Earth Law Center and Yoke, you know, here in the UK, working on alternative governance models, working with nature. They're fellows. We've got businesses, you know, folks from Patagonia have done the fellowship. Regenerative farmers have done the fellowship, trying to work more as community.
Yeah.
So there's so much to say in it. There's so much to say in it. But yeah, I'm
I,
inspired
I,
in very lots of ways.
I think just knitting the kind of core of what your answer there around it's as much how people are working inspires you as what they're working on. With
Absolutely.
your earlier observation about let's celebrate the beauty and goodness of life now, because I think if you've got the label of changemaker, and I come across this with lots of people in the work in this space, I don't get the
Mm.
feeling they're nourishing their souls enough to
I
really sustain or really be an example of the work, because somehow they are so driven by the change and the urgency, they've
yeah.
forgotten the self-care. And I don't mean self-care in terms of a spa or a nice holiday, but the deep
Mm.
kind of deep sustenance of well of being that
Mm.
nurtures their soul. So,
Mm.
what do you encourage people to stay connected so that they can operate in this nature-friendly way without necessarily
Mm.
compromising their own well-being or their colleagues? It can be, if that is
Mm.
not taking care of oneself, that ripples out to colleagues.
It's hard, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
hard. Can I ask you, have you seen that change over the years, do you think? Like, have people becoming more, what would you just, how would you say it, fast paced, you know, outcome led, exhausted,
Well,
not giving themselves time? Yeah, how would you describe that?
yeah, I think I'm in a little bit of a bubble here because of the way that I'm operating in the Netherlands. I'm busy doing stuff digitally, and I don't have a lot of interaction uh,
Right.
on a daily basis with people. I just come across them. So I come across people online. I come across people that are working in or on education or in different things. But I often, and OD for Life, for example, people
Mm.
are coming in like pretty frazzled from a day's work, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So I think that's natural if you're working in the liminal in between and you're trying to um, consider both worlds, as it were.
Mm,
But yeah, I'm not in a position to say whether it's increased or decreased, really.
right,
But I
right.
just
It's interesting.
noticing the change maker propensity not to renew oneself and
Yeah,
regenerate.
yeah. Yeah, I remember doing a retreat for a group that had quite a few activists,
Yeah,
and from one of a larger kind of activist organization that was there, and we work a lot with qigong and movement and tai chi, and preparing
yeah,
people to go out. And I remember noticing, wow, the way that these people are moving feels really, really rigid. Like,
yeah,
it's like you're in that brace position, you're in that
yeah,
tough,
yeah,
hard position.
yeah,
And I had this sense coming up to the festive holiday in December that a lot of people, including myself, were really tired at the end of last year.
yeah,
We're really, really tired. More than, all right, it's been a big year. I had this feeling. And interestingly, I kind of looked a little bit more and a few pieces came out, and one, Cal Newport, who wrote the book on deep work, like the
oh,
American
okay,
writer,
yeah,
he wrote a piece in the New Yorker called, he's calling it the Great Exhaustion.
yeah, yeah,
And people are describing this fatigue epidemic. So that's broader, I suppose, than change makers,
yeah, yeah,
activists,
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of. But the realm that we're traveling through at the moment kind of feels like it's been very tiring. And for me, actually, in the UK, Brexit was the first
yeah,
moment where it felt like we're getting into something here as a society that is and completely energy sapping.
yeah, yeah,
Trying to make sense of it, trying to navigate it, the relational elements of it, the polarization. I feel like we can talk about polarization in society, but that it's almost like going through a breakup. When you go through a breakup, it's so confusing, it's heartbreaking, it's
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like your mind is split into different directions. The future all of a sudden is unknown. It's agonizing. All of that's happening at the same time. And I think in a polarizing world, that's happening for us culturally.
yeah.
So yeah, I can't remember how we got to that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no,
but
yeah, but I think you've described a prevailing or increasing degree of exhaustion, and I was in because it sounds like just from what your reactions to my questions, you're not um, kind of parking the idea of nourishment of oneself. You know, that's
right.
central to your work and the work you do with the bioleadership fellows.
Yes. Thank you for bringing it back. It's
Yeah,
like it's
yeah,
well, the start of the work has to come back to ourselves,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and it's a kind of cruel. It's a paradox, isn't it? We see more urgency in the world, so we give more to it.
yeah,
We give less time to ourselves, but then we're less well equipped to kind of do the work we
yeah,
wanted to do.
yeah.
I was really lucky that I attended I bet you went far from this at the time, but 20 I think it was 2010, 2011 or 2012. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen Buddhist
Yeah.
teacher, wonderful teacher and writer. Um, he he ran a retreat for educators in London,
Oh, right.
and and I went, and honestly, it changed my life in some ways.
Oh,
It was
good.
just a 4 day thing, and something I share and stuff that I'm doing on resilience and care, and he shared it in that session, in that seminar. He started those 4 or 5 days with this. And basically, he drew three circles, but like one small circle representing the self, one medium-sized circle representing our friends, colleagues, our inner circles, and one big circle representing work.
Yeah,
And he just drew this image saying, like of an arrow going from the small circle to the big circle, i.e., we tend to live life by putting all of ourselves into that big circle, into our work.
yeah,
And he said, maybe that's not the best way to go about change. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think the more you look into it, it feels really right. But how do you? So So, and then he did this little thing of like you draw a little arrow back in the small circle, you draw an arrow from the edge back to the heart. And so, before we do anything well, can we bring ourselves home?
Yeah.
And I think that's something I'd like to do more and more,
Yeah.
you know.
Cool. So, you've mentioned, like, urgency and the paradox of taking care of oneself. I think we've covered that in detail.
Mm,
Another kind of paradox is this. Uh, I think we're going to experience it more because we're very sheltered and very comfort now. But nature not only is a benign place, but is a scary, fearsome force that has the potential to destroy lives or destroy our
mm,
livelihoods. And what, how do you, in your bioleadership work and in yourself, how do you, I wouldn't say encompass or integrate, how do you account for that phase of our being, as it were? I mean, we can be violently angry, but also there's, nature itself can put us in great
mm,
danger, and we're jeopardizing our livelihood, as it was anyway, by the way we're treating the planet. So, how do
mm.
you, what's your,
Wow, it's a really interesting question, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, really. Like, because a lot comes up for me there around. I know we've played around with some of the questions before we started, and I know that there's something there around that story of nature works through optimization. So it's through intense competition, and nature can be very violent, but
yeah, yeah,
it's that competition that creates the good of the whole. And I've got a feeling that originally that's where you were coming at it. But
yeah, yeah,
but when I hear you say that question, yeah, I mean, going for a walk in Australia in the forest is very different to going through the walk in the
yeah,
lovely, quaint English countryside, right?
yeah, yeah,
And but more, I know that there's a lot of people, and I don't know how widespread regionally this podcast goes, but I know we've got fellows in Colombia, or I've had conversations with people in Colombia who've said, yeah, there's a lot of people in Colombia who, having gone through a long time of human violence, they they don't have like a habit of going out into wild places. That's a scary thought
yeah,
sometimes, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know, and we've got fellows, and I've spoken to people, in East Africa who, when they were brought up, you had to be really careful with going out into the wild
yeah,
because,
yeah,
again, there's wild creatures.
yeah,
And I'm not saying everybody in those regions has that same perspective, but these things come up. And also here, closer to home, people who, have done retreats with us or quests, holding a fear about being alone in the wild more because of other humans.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so the thought that comes up is, and we haven't spoken so much about it, but I mean, we touched on it when the 24-hour journey that I had. But a lot
yeah,
of what I've loved doing over the years is holding and facilitating programs or journeys where people can be alone in the wild
yeah,
and honoring traditions from around the world that work in that way. Trying to do it in a way that bridges how we live in the modern world, but still, I call them quests. I've never called it a vision quest because I want to be respectful to the traditions that really do call it that. But we call it a nature quest. Slow down, let everything go from the busyness of life, and then spend some
yeah,
time alone in nature. And what I've learned from that is that it's actually the community around you when you do it is so important,
yeah,
you know. And so maybe you might say, so I'm being a bit long-winded with this, but we need each other to connect with nature as well.
right,
We even if it's just like, let's prepare for it. You're going to do it. This is important for you. We're here with you, or we create habits together so that you
yeah,
can do it. Or when you go out, and you come back, and it's when you tell the story of what you've seen that sometimes the magic happens. And so I guess I'm saying a society, a culture, a group of people together help each other connect with nature.
Right.
Um, yeah, does that make sense? I don't know if that.
Yeah, well, my last interviewee, Luis from Colombia, he
Mm,
also said a lot of people in Colombia didn't go out into nature, not because nature was dangerous, and they have amazing diversity of all kinds of
right.
eco tones there, but because of the political and the criminal
Yeah,
being in nature. So a lot of people were, concerned in some areas to go into nature because of that.
exactly.
So that's
Exactly.
not even nature. That's just, well, that's not nature, but it's humans uh, cap, uh, capitalizing on natural resources in a way, you could say. Okay, I'm just thinking. I haven't covered hardly any of the things I prepared, but
Well, it was quite, there were some big themes in there,
yeah,
weren't
no, yeah.
there?
So I think I think we can draw into a close. I'm wondering if you've got any final thoughts about what we've spoken about that you'd love to share, or some message for the listeners about this moment we're in. I think you said some very beautiful things there that are important. But
Mm.
is there anything else that you'd like to share, or that you haven't said, or that comes as a result of our conversation now?
Mm. We touched on a few things, didn't we? And quite
Yeah,
big things. And you know what? Maybe the two things that come to mind are we've already touched on it, but what we want to see out in the world, we somehow have to cultivate inside. I'm saying it that way because there's a wonderful gentleman called Ilarion Merkuliev, and
okay,
he's an indigenous elder. He's based in Alaska, and what we now call Alaska. And he's spoken in the fellowship a few times and speaks very beautifully about that principle. What we want to see out there, we somehow have to kind of tend to it inside. So,
beautiful. Yeah, yeah,
that's there. The other one for me is this notion of walking through the world, just just holding the questions together.
yeah,
Like like a wish that I have was somehow that sense of like feeling like we can let go of having an answer.
yeah,
And I've found that both more and more helpful, and I've learned more and more that we have that requires a little bit of coding between us to say, ah, that's what the way we're working.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's a dance, it's the dance to sort of hold the questions, but still help each other create clarity. That's one of my big lessons over the last years with the fellowship, actually, or
Yeah,
the bioleadership project as a whole. That dance of like, these are amazing principles, but then sort of how do you ground them so that there's a little bit of walking ground or stepping stones, that
yeah,
seems to be maybe what we need to do more and more. But yeah.
so a kind of integration of one's inner vision with one in one's life, and then this living the questions together. That was a vision I had. Like, you need a community if you're going to shift a complex system. You need all kinds of different sorts of knowledge and knowing, and we need to live the
Mm,
questions together, because without that co-inquiry, you're not drawing in the sources of knowledge. And that's not
mm,
about, it's not about a strategy, it's just about the next best step. And then, because we don't know, the complexity and the degradation and the issues, you need to bring all parties together
yeah.
and inquire. And that would be my vision of how we restore the world, whatever state it
That's
gets into.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, yeah, it takes me back to just like these things sometimes take time and that paradox of
yeah, yeah.
it's busy, it's urgent, you know.
Busy, it's urgent, but you need 7-generation timeline.
Yeah, and time to notice,
Yeah.
time to notice.
Well, that's a beautiful observation to end on. So I'm going to finish the recording here. And